The end of days is near. Welcome back to the journey of an impossible challenge. I'm trying to create a $1 million game with a $5,000 budget because of a wager with a friend. This is a side note. In the last video, I mentioned the different ways in which I was going to look for how to become a game developer. And I completely missed one. Learning from the comment section. So a user commented just a few tidbits from a somewhat experienced game developer. Work on a vertical slice first. I'm not really sure what that is, but I'm gonna find out by the next video. And the comment continued. Then develop from there. With the full intent of throwing the vertical slice away, you'll be able to identify serious issues with the game design earlier, and it will be easier and cheaper to fix it the second time around. There's another part to it. Your initial assessment did not include audio. You cannot believe how expensive proper audio can get. That is something I completely disregarded, and I would have to put it into the budget. Now I'm going to break down what I did this week, which it wasn't much. The first half of the week was dealing with some issues trying to learn how to video edit. The second half of the week, I discovered the Scratch platform, which teaches the basics of making a game. The Scratch platform was created by MIT Media Lab, which is a research laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The Scratch platform is like a drag and drop programming language where you have a person come in and create their own game that others can play. Its main user base are really beginners and children. And because I know nothing about game development, I feel this might be the one key to get me to start the whole process. And the cool thing is that you're able to visually see what's happening as you're creating it. After creating an account, it leads you to 3 buttons: Create, Explore, and Ideas. Of course, let's jump in right away into the Create button to see what games I can create right away. So the immediate thing we could see is, on the left side, there are different instructions. In the middle is where all your instructions are going to be. And on the right side, there's a cat inside of a box. So now let's go into the first box, the first section on the left side, and let's try to explain very simply what exactly each category of buttons do. We have the motion, which is how you make the cat move. The looks, which changes what happens to the character. We have the button that says sound. It all has what sounds are going to be played within the game itself. The events are the things that happen automatically as soon as you start the game. The controls are the way a player can control the character that's on the screen. Sensing is the interaction the character has with the rest of the world around them. Operators are the blocks that are used to mathematically make calculations between the other blocks and how they interact with each other. Variables are the different equations on how different blocks will interact with each other, and my block is a special button where you can make custom buttons outside the scope of what we already have here. And I'm not going to pretend like I actually knew all this. I just looked it up. Just like everything else that I'm going to show in this video, I really just went through YouTube and I looked it up online to come up with the answers on how to actually do every single thing I'm doing. The first thing I want to do is make a very super simple game so that I can be able to play with the character. However, I want to input my own character and not have the cat be the main character. Hey friend, can you draw me a character? The way you input a character is the Costumes tab. So within the Costumes tab, there's a little mouse all the way at the bottom with a plus sign. Then a menu is going to pop up when you hover over it. It mentions to upload your costume. As soon as you click it, a screen comes up and you're able to just upload the photo of the illustration that you want to input inside the actual program. There are times that the program uploads the illustration extremely big. So what you have to do is zoom out and click the button at the bottom to make it into a vector. That will allow the program to understand the illustration. You reduce down the sides, grabbing one of the corners and pulling it down. And just like I was saying, Scratch is really good at being able to show you a preview. And since we have a brand new character, now we have to start thinking about what will the character do. One thing we have to keep in mind is that we always have to start the character at a certain position. And all the code goes right after that. And since we're making a 2D game, currently the only way that a character can move is left and right. So let's quickly input the blocks that will allow the character to move forward and backwards. The next step is to try to make the character interact with the floor. We can't just have a character floating since it won't make such entertaining gameplay. The main way to do this is by adding gravity into the game, having some sort of variable that is affecting the character at all times, so the character is always going to have a downward force. This is going to add another problem that can quickly be resolved, where the character is not going to be on the screen, but it does teach us one important thing, that the program itself is not just limited to the inside of this box. There is some room outside the bounds that cannot be seen. But now let's create some sort of platform to make an initial start of building the game. To create the floor, the initial floor that we're going to use, it's very easy. Underneath the main box where you can see everything, there's a little box that says stage. Inside of this box, you have the word backdrops. This word signifies that inside this sprite, we have a background that will be affecting only this sprite. Inside of this, we can go into the tools on the side and click on the square box. This will allow us to create a square inside of the actual program. I will never get over the fact that you can always see the preview of what's happening while you're creating the program. Now, let's widen the actual box that we already have and try to make a floor. So instead of having a square, we're going to make it into a rectangle. And we're going to move that square all the way to the bottom underneath the character. The character within the screen is still stuck at the bottom because the program is still going. And the character still slips right through the ground because we still haven't applied any sort of code that will affect it. But we can easily fix this by inputting code where the sprite that we have about the character, where the program has an idea of how the character and the new asset that we made has to be affected by each other. We want the character in the game to repel off the floor. And we do this by making the color purple the color that the program recognizes does not want to interact with the character. Of course, this is going to be in the Sensings tab because it deals with interaction between sprites or the player character. When looking at the video, it's pretty cool that the character is always repelling and it could easily show exactly what's happening. The character is always repelling away from the floor as it's moving left at a character, and the program is always checking to see when the character is trying to touch the color purple. Now that we have the left and right movement, and we have a floor which can be considered the starting of a stage, when looking at the game and simplifying it as much as I could, it's like a small maze where there's a starting point, there's a middle where all the content is, and there's an endpoint. The starting point for most games is very similar. It is a place or a location where the character feels comfortable or where it could show the most personality. The middle of the game is where the creator, the developer, adds obstacles, different items that the character can find, other non-playable characters that help the main player along the way, and different items that the character can find to use along their journey. The end point of a game can be considered the final battle. The current game that I have is only made up of one screen. The main goal that I would have is to expand the world by adding other screens that attach together, or by making the world bigger. Now, currently we have our background and our character on the same sprite. I would have to first separate this to make it so that later on, when everything gets really complicated, the character and the background will still be able to interact with each other. Because right now we only have one color. This is where we're going to add a secondary layer where the current background is going to be duplicated. One thing that we have to keep in mind is that both layers are going to be shown at the same time when the program is started. So let's transfer. So I'm going to transfer over the background that we currently have and put it into the new sprite so that both the character sprite and the background sprite are separated. And now that we have two sprites that are not affecting each other in the same layer, we have to add code where the character sprite will also know what the background sprite is doing. If we don't start adding code to both layers, what's going to happen is that the program is not going to understand what both layers are doing when the program is running. And because of this, now we also have to separate what exactly is gravity affecting. Is the gravity affecting the sprite or the background, or is it affecting both layers at the same time? But in this program, the background is going to stay the same, so gravity does not have to affect it. We have to add the code and separate it so that only the character is affected by gravity, and the background is not affected at all. We do this by making a whole new variable where only the sprite is affected by gravity. You can see this right here, that we had a button that we created for gravity, but now when we're replacing it, we're only clicking that this sprite and only this sprite is affected by the gravity. And of course, we have to replace everything so that the new variable is what the program is learning and understanding. And it should work exactly the way it was working before, except now we know that gravity only affects the character and it does not affect the level. And as soon as we start the program, it seems like the character is floating, it's levitating. Gravity is not affecting the actual character and it's not moving it downward, but it's a simple fix. I completely forgot. One of the actual variables didn't change, and now the character can move up and down freely. Now, to expand the world, we have to make more sprites or more backgrounds that we're going to use to be able to connect everything together. And of course, we have to add the code so that the program understands we're trying to start connecting the different backgrounds together. I'm still going to be very honest with you. When I was going through everything, I still don't fully understand what each button does. And this is part of the learning process that I have to start focusing on trying to learn. What I am understanding is that there are moments where you have to add blocks where it has to show a signal that is interpreted by the program that can only be done if this action is being created. One example could be like the broadcast block, where it's only activated if something else is happening. And this is what I'm doing when placing this block inside the background, where the background won't change unless something happens. And in this instance, we're trying to make it so that when the character makes it to the edge of the screen, the program understands that it has to change backgrounds to allow the character to move throughout the entire program. Now that I've made it to the end where I can allow the character to get to the edge of the screen and change the background, all we have to do now is make it all the way to the finish line and connect all the different backgrounds together. This was in fact just a starting point. I don't really understand the program fully in how the blocks interact with each other. So, because I'm not an expert, I am going to wait on actually explaining everything step by step, or even explaining how the interactions between the blocks and the characters on the screen go. But in a later video, I will definitely be putting everything step by step, or maybe just putting more input into exactly what's happening. The only thing I have left to do is enjoy playing the simple game that I finally was able to create at the end of this.